Hello everyone, welcome to coding class for ILS server. A lot of people didn't make it to the coding class, so by popular demand, I am now making another abridged version for the people that didn't make it. So welcome. Okay, so let's get started. In this course, we will show you, or we will learn how to speak the language of code, how to solve problems using computers, and how to use online resources to solve problems, and much more. The language of code is just like English, Spanish, French, any other language, except you communicate with computers instead of people. And there are many coding languages, such as you may have heard of some of these: JavaScript, HTML, CSS, C, C++, C Sharp, Java, Ruby, Python, Scratch even is a coding language. And they all synergize to, not exactly synergize, but they all accomplish the same goal, which is to communicate with computers, albeit in many different ways. So computers use binary. This is the most basic you can get, the lowest level. Binary is a series of zeros and ones, and a computer can read these. So every time you write in your code, it's turned into zeros and ones by a compiler, which is like a translator. It turns your code into binary. Just like in real life, there are many coding languages. So some of these are high level. So they're on a spectrum. Let's say you have low level languages, which are hard to understand, but they run fast. They're easy for computers to understand. They're hard for humans to understand. And high-level languages are easy for humans to understand, but they may run slower. It really doesn't matter anymore. It's pretty negligible at this point, at this day and age, if you code in Java versus assembly. So, we have low-level languages such as assembly. Assembly language is very famous. It was very prevalent, I'd say a decade, 15 years ago, but it's mostly fallen out of favor. Now there are still some people that code in assembly, but not much. And we also have this coding language that I'm not allowed to say the name of, but it's very famous as a kind of a joke language. It's used as a very complex coding language with only 8 characters. I think it's the square brackets, you have the sharp brackets, you have plus, minus, comma, and period. And you basically navigate around in your computer's memory, and you can change each cell at a time. So, for example, you have memory slots in your computer, and there are like thousands, millions of these memory slots, and you have to just navigate to each one and manually change it from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0 to perform stuff like addition, subtraction, loops. It's very hard to get anything done in these languages. But now we can get onto high-level languages. High-level languages are like Java, which is the most popular one, um, which I also learned as my first language. So Python is also another very high-level language. It's very easy to learn. But the three that we will be learning are HTML, CSS, and JS, which stand for Hypertext Markup Language, Cascading Style Sheets, and JavaScript. So why do we learn these three? They kind of go hand in hand, you know? Um, they're partners. So they're the backbones to almost every single website you can find on the internet. That means YouTube, Google, Facebook, even small websites like Cool Math Games, TikTok, social media, Twitter. All these are in HTML, CSS, and JS, or maybe just JS on its own. It depends on how you would like to implement your your code. So HTML, as previously stated, stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's one of the three web development languages. HTML tells you what is on the web page. So in the code on the bottom left, we have uh, tags, which is HTML, how HTML works. There's a tag system, and you see we have the button tag, which creates the button, the P tag, which creates text, and the A tag, which creates a hyperlink. And then you can just put all these together and make the output over here, which is button text hyperlink, and there's a button, a piece of text in the hyperlink. CSS is pretty much your interior designer of your home. It tells you how everything should look, because this HTML here looks very bad. You can use CSS code to make it look better. For example, here's a better button. You can have a black background. Basically, what CSS can do is it can change colors, sizes, positions, fonts, and animations. Uh, and there's a lot more coming. CSS is always getting updates, and these updates make it do even more things. Like a couple of years ago, CSS couldn't do 3D animation, but now it can, which is insane. It's insane how much CSS can get done. Oops. And JavaScript. So HTML CSS may make your website look the part, but it won't do the part. So it can't really do anything until you add JavaScript as your coding language. Because you can press this button all you want, it's not gonna do anything. So we gotta add code. We gotta add JavaScript code that tells you what it should do. So this JavaScript code will basically just uh, tell your computer that when the button is pressed, it will change the text to say thanks for pressing. Okay, so some things you'll need for coding. You really only need a computer. That's all you need. You can right click on your desktop, create a new notepad document, and title it index.html and start coding. But you know that doesn't look very good. It's white background on black text, which is obviously not very good. It leads to eye strain and stuff like that, and just doesn't look too good. So, an IDE is highly recommended. We'll get to that in a second. An IDE uh, basically adds more tools to your kit so that you can code faster. You can code for longer because you usually have the black on white text, which is very good for your eyes and lessens eye strain. That's what people say. And also, you might want an internet connection. Now, the reason you want an internet connection is because you want to research your problems. So, if you don't memorize a snippet of code that you need, for example, we'll get to this in a second, and you don't know a snippet of code, and you might want to take it off the internet. So, this is totally fine. There are many websites dedicated to code sharing, and such as W3 Schools, Stack Overflow is a really big one, uh, and GitHub. GitHub is not really code sharing, but more publishing, but a lot of people post their code onto GitHub to share. Okay, so what's an IDE? An IDE, also called an integrated development environment, is a text editor on steroids. So basically, what a text editor is, it's like Google Docs or Microsoft Word or Notepad on your computer, but just with extra tools. So for example, you'll have syntax highlighting, which is it puts colors on your text for different functions or for different uses. For example, it'll highlight loops in one color, it'll highlight variables in a different color, and it's very easy to use. Uh, Not easy. Well, it is easy to use, but it also helps you with your coding and your debugging. Terminals, which are you can issue commands to the file to your computer directly from the text editor instead of having to right click, open up a PowerShell, and then doing that stuff. And you can also get custom add-ons. There are many different add-ons, and many people code add-ons for text editors, which is very nice. Very good community. So, some web dev IDEs I do recommend. Atom, which is a nice, lightweight text editor. It's not really anything notable. I wouldn't recommend you actually get Atom because Atom is too lightweight. It's not very intuitive to understand at a first glance, and it doesn't have many of the tools that you would like in a text editor. So next we're going to come over to Visual Studio Code, which is my text editor of choice. I use Visual Studio Code because of some main things. One, there are a lot of add-ons, and it's made by a reputable developer. It's made by Microsoft actually, and people code add-ons for Visual Studio Code. For example, LiveShare, which lets you pretty much have multiple people work on one section of code at a time. A lot of coders don't actually prefer LiveShare to GitHub, which is a commit-based system where you have to save where everyone, basically each person on the project, this is for GitHub, not LiveShare, everyone gets a copy of the project and they can make edits to it, and then they can commit it and it sends it back to the server, the master copy, and it sends those edits to the master copy, which you can run into all kinds of issues such as when multiple people work on a file at once, you can actually get some problems such as conflicts and stuff like that. So I've used GitHub before, Git commit, or just Git in general, and it is not fun. Not if you're working on like a 3-man project, but if you're working on like a 12-man project, it is very, very valuable. So live share is decent. You know, it's not the best, but it'll do. Notepad++. It's just Notepad with colors. I don't really like it, and a lot of people don't like it because it does have that white background on with the black text. But it does have syntax highlighting, but it doesn't have much else other than that. And WebStorm by JetBrains. It's the best on the list, but it costs $130 per year. Unless you go to UB Math or you go to a university, then you can get a student license and get it for free. So yes, it does cost $130 per year, which is an exorbitant amount. But I think this $130 is actually for their entire suite. Let's look at the Adobe. You know, you pay for Photoshop, but you also get Illustrator, you also get Lightroom, you get all these other applications. So if you pay for WebStorm, you'd also get like IntelliJ, you get PyCharm, you get RubyMine, you get a bunch of other things too along with it. So yeah, these tools are pretty expensive. Um, Overall, I would recommend VS Code, Visual Studio Code. It's easy to use for beginners, and it's just a good mix of lightweight and ease of use. Okay, so let's get started on our project. Okay, so how do we start coding? So we right click, hit new, where we mouse over new, and we hit folder, and we name this folder for first coding project. You can see I have two others from previous classes. So you want to name your folders accordingly, because if you don't, and if you get a bunch of project folders in your computer and you can't, let's say, differentiate between them, then you start to run into problems where if you want to work on one project, you can't. You have to scroll through all of your code and try to work out which one is which. So naming your projects appropriately is always good. We open up our folder, click new. Actually, no. This is the normie way. We need to open up VS Code. Okay, I'm going to show you two ways you can initialize. You can initialize your folders. So, or initialize your project. You can right-click here, click new, mouse over new text document, name this index.html, and you click yes. And this works. But you can also do this through VS Code, which is a lot easier. If we click File, Open Folder, and we click First Coding Project, select folder. Let's make this big. And we can mouse over this part and click New File. And we call this index.html. And we could come over here, and now we can start coding. So we will also want to create a style.css file for later. Okay, how do we code in HTML? Well, I mentioned this before. We have tags. The first tag we want to use is HTML. There's the autocomplete, you see. You could just do HTML and then type in bracket slash, and it'll automatically complete it for you. So most HTML comes in pairs of tags. You have the initializing tag, the opening tag, which states, hey, anything in here is HTML code, because it's the HTML tag. And you have the closing tag that says, that's the end of the tag. So HTML tag means pretty much we're coding in HTML. So we can come down here, and the next tag we're going to use is body tag. Body. And we could come down here, /body. To say, body is like, you know, you have the arms, the legs, the limbs of your body. You also have the buttons, the text, the titles of your page, which is why it's called the body tag. You have all of the appendages. Next tag, we're going to learn P tag. P stands for paragraph. You can actually comment this. You should always comment your code to make it look good. P is for paragraph. So paragraph, it's your basic text of your HTML. So we can put, let's say, hello world. So hello world is, I think, the first command issued on a computer ever was to print hello world. It's a very historic statement. And in order to look at how our project is, we can actually come over here to our project file. So just double click here and double click index.html, and it'll say hello world. This is our website. Okay. So Now we're going to introduce you guys to a new tag. It is the H1 tag. H stands for header. We can actually comment this in. H is for header. So in the header tag, we can write my first, oops, that is not capital, my first website. There are a lot of HTML tags that you just have to memorize. If you don't, you can go onto the web, you can go onto the Google and search it, but you know, it's whatever. You don't have to really memorize these. Okay, now we're gonna come in here, open up our project again, and my first website. So if your changes aren't showing up, that's for two reasons. One, you have to save your document before your changes will have to show up, and then you have to reload the page as well. So for example, if we add a new tag, it's called the button tag, pretty self-explanatory, and we type click me. If we don't save that, if it's not showing up because it doesn't automatically update. So we have to save this. Well, it's still not showing up, right? Well, you have to reload the page, and there it goes. There is the button. So that's pretty much all the HTML for now. But you know, it doesn't look very good. So, excuse me. We have to introduce ourselves to the CSS. So, the CSS is tag based. So pretty much, it's not like HTML. Well, it is like HTML, but it's not. So there's different syntax. Oh, well, syntax is pretty much it's the punctuation, you could say. It's some certain rules they have to follow to make your code recognizable to the computer. So the syntax for HTML is you need the brackets, the sharp brackets, and then you need like to specify what you want to put in, and then so sometimes you need the closing and sometimes you don't. So yeah, that's the syntax for HTML. There's a different syntax for CSS. So pretty much you specify what you want to modify. So in this case, we're going to modify H1, and we need curly brackets, and we need to press enter a couple times. And we need to save that. And then we can come in here. We can say background dash color colon, and this is the syntax again for CSS. You need what you want to change, which is the background color. We want to change the background color, colon, what you want to change it to. In this case, we want black. Oh, we just do not want H1. We need body. So the body is, let me specify what the body is. The body is the background of your website. So if we come Control-Shift-I, which is inspect element, we can mouse over body, and we can see it occupies the entire background of our website. What's highlighted in blue is the body, and what's highlighted in orange, which is the border, which is also part of the body. So yeah, this is what consists of the body tag. If we come over here, we can modify the body tag to have the background color of black. And if we reload, well, it's not changing. This is something that we need to specify. So, right now, index.html and style.css have no way of communicating. They can't talk to each other because they're not linked. So we need to grab a link. So we can come over to, and we can search this up because I don't memorize this, how to link CSS to HTML. And we can click this, and we can just come down here. This is it. This is the code that you need. So this is something that every coder does. You need to copy code and paste it, or it's very handy to copy and paste code. It's not really recommended to just plainly copy and paste, and you need to modify it to make sure it fits. But this is something that basically every coder does. So where do we put this? We put this in the head tag. The head is for all the setup stuff. It doesn't actually have a physical representation of on your web page, so it actually doesn't exist on your web page, but it's there to put all of your setup stuff in. For example, you want to import fonts, which we'll do later, you can put it in the head tag. You want to link stuff, you put it in the head tag. Okay, so this should work, right? Well, it's not. I saved the document, and it's not working. Well, why is that? Well, this is what I touched on before. We have to modify our code to make sure it's compatible with our own code. We have to modify the code that we're copy pasting in. You can't just leave it like this, because the problem that we have here is that some people have have different names for different things. For example, this person who posted it on W3 Schools named this styles.css. They named their files styles.css. We don't have a styles.css file. We have a style.css file. Also, this href stuff, it means hyperreference. It just brings you to there. You specify your file name over here. So now if we reload the page, it should work. Yay, our background is black. But now we can't see our text, which is a big problem. So we're going to come over here and we have to modify our text. So I'll show you actually a little trick that I didn't show the other class. You can specify multiple tags with the comma, H1 and P. Look, now you specify with both H1 and P. So you can, so here there are two ways of doing this. You could do H1 and P over here, or you could just do both in one. And since we're modifying the same things for both, it's just way more convenient to put both in, to specify both at once. So now if whatever we put in here will modify both the H1 and P tags instead of just one at a time. Oops, got rid of my curly bracket. Okay, so we're gonna change the color. Very straightforward. Color, colon, white, white, semicolon. Okay, now the text is white. That's great. Okay, we have white text, we have black background, but now our button needs a bit of work. So, there's a lot of button code, and I might as well just code this myself. Excuse me. Button. So you could code this in-house by yourself. You could code it from scratch, or you could get it off the internet. There are many good places that I showed the other class, and I'll show you guys soon. There are many good places to get button code. So we're just gonna code it ourselves. Padding is altering the size of the button. So we're gonna do 32px, 15px, and if we reload this, ooh, we actually do need color colon green. We can have a green button. Oh wait, that is text color. We need background dash color. There we go. And that should work. Okay, it's green, but it doesn't really look very well. That is because we need border none. And now we have that. So that's a styled button, but we need some other code. Display colon inline block. This is for formatting, and it still didn't change anything. There's a bunch of button code that you can use. Margin colon none. But we can just get button code off the internet. This is, you know, the logic is why go through all this excruciating work to style your buttons? We could just get button styling off the internet. So we could go to w3schools.com. Actually, W3, we can search it up. W3 schools button. Yes. HTML button. Nope. CSS buttons. Nope. CSS buttons. Yes. Okay. They have button code right here. This is very good. Very, very good. So, you can add this button code inside, and it should work, right? Well, no, not really. It didn't work. It didn't style our button at all. Why is that? Well, you see, you might have noticed we have this dot in front of our button tag. Now, this dot tells CSS to refer to the class button. A class is pretty much like a label that you can give to many things. So, for example, if we just create another button, and we want to style this differently, we can actually give it a class equals button. Can title this hello, and this button will get styled, but this button won't. So we kind of don't want to do this. So we will get rid of this dot, and now it will refer to all buttons globally. So just keep in mind, if you want to not refer to all buttons globally, and you want to refer to just some buttons and style other buttons differently, you can give an ID, which applies to one thing only, that's like a name, or a class, which is like a last name, which applies to many things. So these are different ways you can choose which buttons to style and which ones to not. This works for anything. You can give anything an ID, you can give anything a class. For example, it is good to give things IDs. It's good to give your p tags IDs. You can do ID equals, oops, you have to do this inside the bracket, instead of the first bracket, by the way. ID equals p tag, and now we can do this. We can style this p tag individually. For example, p hashtag refers to IDs, so hashtag p tag, and now we can call this, for example, color colon green, and now it's green. And that is how IDs work, which we will go into more in depth later. You don't have to memorize any of this. This is just extra tangent stuff. Okay, that is pretty much the CSS. But now we do have a different problem, which is that we don't have a font for our website. So, man's best friend, Google Fonts, fonts.google.com. We can come over here and we can take a font. I like Railway. Railway. Railway is a good font. So we're going to take Light 300, and we can come over here, click select a style, click embed, and we need to copy this into our HTML, into our head tag. There we go. So pretty much what this is doing is it is taking us over here to the Railway font, the API link to the Railway font. So what an API is it's pretty much like it's a service. It's a service that you can use, and it'll pretty much, it's another person's code that gives you something when requested. So this is pretty much a request that says give me the Railway font, and it is taking you to this, which is all the code for the Railway font. Just very cool. Now we can just copy this to toss it into our H1 and P tags over here. And now we will have Railway font. There we go. We also might want to put it in our button. Putting it in our button would be nice. There we go. Now everything is a Railway font. And that's pretty much all for today. I'll see you guys next week, where we'll talk about more CSS stuff and some HTML tricks. And also we'll get into JavaScript, which is, very scary.